Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Literature,
where we apply the revolutionary Mott skill
to classic and contemporary works of prose.
So, join us once again, won't you?
Good evening, and welcome back to Lost Signals Discusses Literature. My name is Chris Morgan, and I'm here with Scott Thurlow.
I'm a humanitarian.
And Stephen Ormosi.
I'm vegan.
And today we are discussing the short story To Serve Man by Damon Knight from Galaxy Science Fiction, November 1950. This served as the this is
that a pun? Yeah. What are you doing here?
I didn't even think
God
about
damn
that.
it! Stop it with the puns.
It is a pun.
Go on.
It's a story where the Twilight Zone episode of the same name was based. And Scott, do you have a funny logline for us?
Farmland : Earth. That's what I'm going with.
Yeah. Fair.
It's like the Canomit Facebook. All right.
Yeah.
So Scott, why don't you continue talking?
Sure. So this is a rather famous, probably story, if not the short story. Many people might be familiar with the Twilight Zone adaptation, one of the most famous ones ever, where a race of aliens called the Catamits, is that correct? Is that correct pronunciation? They come to Earth and offer us highly advanced technological means to solve hunger and war, and poverty, and all of that in order to make humanity better. So they claim humanity tests them, or at least the UN wants to question their motives and why they're doing this. They seem to check out. They give them a sort of ad hoc, I guess, lie detector test, which seems to confirm that they're indeed altruistic in their means. They improve Earth indeed. Everybody basically quits their jobs and mills around and waits for the next, vacation ship from Earth to the Catamite planet.
Yeah, it's the exchange program.
Yes, and so while they're doing this, the main character and his buddy managed to, because they are linguists, originally their job was translating for the UN. They decide to, sort of as a hobby, just like almost general boredom / scientific curiosity, try to decipher the Catamite language. They found one book, which they finally decipher. The title is How to Serve Man, of course, or How to Serve Men. And spoiler, what a twist, it's a cookbook. The Catamites are indeed farming humans for a delicacy or just to eat in general, which is why they wanted to improve the health of the planet at large, because they will make better food. And that's it. That's pretty much the end of the story and the plot. So I'm looking at a 2 for a score. It's a pretty short story. It's perfectly solid. There's not a lot to it, but there's enough. And like I said, it's very famous. Like, I definitely personally had seen the Twilight Zone episode many, many times. It's always like one of the top 10 or whatever they count it down. But yeah, having never actually read the story until now, I think it was pretty solid. And I guess the thing I'll say, maybe I'll say for themes or something, but stories like this, especially in 1950, were more about the idea and not like the story itself, as sci-fi like always has been pretty much. So that's why I'm sticking with it too. Very, very solid too, to be sure, but 2.
Yeah, that's. I was debating. I'm like trying to figure out, and you that nailed on the head. I'm going to give it a 2 because you're right. Stories like this are excellent, but they are about the idea. It's about. There really isn't. With this, it's like 5.
No, like,
it's 5.5 pages. Yeah, so it's not like and it's first person, so there is really only so much they can do.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of agree. It's probably a 2 for me. Or almost definitely a 2 for me. It is a story that is kind of like in the tradition of O. Henry, like as many Twilight Zone,
right? Yeah, you're right.
As many of the things that Twilight Zone took from were, or in terms of the
similar vein,
or in their own like original stories, like kind of the same way. Like it's, you think it's one thing, but it's a different thing, and that's what this story is all about.
The interesting thing about this is it really, if you've seen the Twilight Zone episode, this really reads like a treatment because they do a really great job of blending the first-person narrative through flashback and then giving you a bigger perspective of it. But in a weird way, I find the ending of this more chilling, where the protagonist and his friend Gregory, they both applied for. Gregory is trying to prove that there's something nefarious behind the Canamites, and he applied for an exchange program to find out what it was. I don't remember I don't think our protagonist did, and Gregory invites him down for a drink.
He didn't apply, but he's been accepted.
Yeah, he's been
was
accepted.
Yeah, I think he must have applied.
Well, Gregory was just like, hey, we've both been accepted. And he's like, brings him down to have a whiskey or whatever. And he's basically like, well, and Gregory's like, it's a cookbook. It's this weird resolution to, like, there's nothing he can do about it.
It's somewhat abrupt, but still, it's like,
because in the Twilight Zone episode, it's just as he's boarding the ship that she's like, it's a cookbook. It's a cookbook. And in this one, I just like the way they did the ending, where it's so much creepier, because it's like, hi, we're in a bar and we're in the embassy or by the embassy, and hi, I'd let you know that you and I are going to be we're leaving an exchange ship last week, and oh, by the way, this thing's a cookbook.
But I will say, like, the entire story is in service to a punchline, basically.
It totally is. That's why it reads like a treatment.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say I like that last paragraph. I thought it was really the most effective part of the story.
No, I think that's all fair. Not much more to say. Like I said, I could maybe be convinced if one of you was going to make a case for a soft 3, but I think we're all going with a solid 2, which I think is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I'm actually going with a softer 2 now that I think about it, just because it is an entire story in service to a punchline.
Stop using the word serve and service, goddammit. or keep using it, I guess.
To service man. That would have been a better book.
Perhaps. Maybe.
Service man.
But yeah, I'm gonna stick with it 2. It's gonna be a softer 2, but it's not gonna be. It doesn't go down to a 1, and I don't think it approaches a 3.
All right, fair enough. I got you.
Okay, Steve, I want to talk about themes.
Sure. There's a lot that, in terms of like world peace, and like one of the things that we talk about, between us sometimes is like, what would it take to achieve world peace? And like, oh, we'd have to go to war with Mars. Like that's something that has been bandied about between us. And that this story is kind of the short story, and where it's like,
yeah,
but in the opposite way of like, oh, someone brings you peace, and then, but it's in service to them. Like now you have peace, but also you're going to be eaten. And is that, I think an interesting question to ask is like, is that better than destroying yourselves through nuclear war? Like, maybe not all human beings are going to be eaten, but some of them are.
Well, yeah, some of them are going to be as a farm, because they did say the Canaanites that were coming down were being passed around the cookbook. So it's basically like, well, you people are going to be here. We're bringing cattle back home.
Right.
But they were also talking about, as they were saying, like improving the irrigation and putting them so they can increase food.
They want to make them fat.
And then they were trying to cure all the diseases to make us healthier.
Right.
Sure.
So
of course.
definitely this was going to be a cattle ranch. And I think getting back to world peace, there's something in the book that in the story where he was just like, there's like 3 components to it. It's just like, well, there's no need for war because everybody's protected by the shields. It had to do with economics too. It's just like nobody wants anything, so what's the motivation?
There's no resource.
There's no
essentially,
which is basically what cattle are. Like, right? They have no wants, they have no needs. They go out every morning and graze, and then they come back, and then they get slaughtered. And like that's kind of what they're grooming human beings to be. Is like you're grooming this peaceful,
we're like chickens.
Yeah, exactly. And like I dig it for that. I give them more than enough credit to give it a 1 for that, I think.
Now, I don't know if I was going to bring this up, but I guess I will just briefly, because of the time in which it was written. Like, you could maybe extract some like Cold War, like paranoia from it, because at least one character, like the main character's friend Gregory, you mentioned, he seems like he's painted as if he's like a crazy conspiracy nut, like. At first, like he's the only one person who's still like, these Canaanites, they're up to something there, they have an ulterior motive. But the old conspiracy theorist was right in this case.
Yeah,
so like you can sort of get that, but yeah, like you said, it's an idea of like, what if, like, can there be true altruism even if aliens come down and provide us with everything we ever need? Why would they do that? Because they want to cook us and farm us and eat us, as like sort of like. And I also thought of real quickly, 8 o'clock in the morning. Or at least they live as well.
Yeah.
We're their third world country, more or less. And they're just gonna like basically build a farm on this planet made of us.
I think that is really interesting in the way that this story paints the alien race with human characteristics, right? Like they are only in this for themselves, and it must be that way, right? Like, and that's
a
what
good point.
the character Gregory says, and because it's framed that way, because from the beginning it's the narrator's like, I was basically the only one that wasn't concerned about the way that they were presenting themselves, and then he turns out to be wrong. It's almost like, hey, especially because it happens like right in like Cold War era, 1950, where it's like, because it's framed that way, it's like, don't trust those motherfuckers from like anywhere else, you know, like, because they have a reason that they're doing this, and I think that's interesting as well. So I'm gonna definitely give it a 1.
Yeah, I think it's all there. I actually want to go back real quick. Themes. I don't know if this is technically themes, but you were saying you found this like more chilling or more like disconcerting for the ending. I always, now having compared the story to the episode, I think I like the episode better because he's on the ship and they're like, "Eat up, Mister Whatever." We need you.
All right, maybe I should clarify the reveal of that as a cookbook.
Okay.
I like the reveal better there because in the episode, the Canaanite comes in and because he threw his food down, and the Canaanite comes in and he's like, "We want you to lose weight," and the Canaanite's like feeling his arm, like
Sure. I always thought that a bit more disturbing.
That is much more disturbing. I was just talking. Maybe I should have clarified that the reveal I liked better.
Yeah, that's all fine. But yeah, I'm going to give themes a solid 1 for everything we just said because I think there's enough there and it was handled well.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to definitely give it a 1. But back to something one of you were saying, there is a line in there where they were talking about, the protagonist was talking about the green leather harness and shorts were probably a concession to our notions of public decency. So, I mean, there is a whole thing where they did, because they did kind of were these hairy little
they're pig creatures as far as I can tell.
Which
man-bear pigs.
Man-bear pigs.
They were also hairy and stuff, like instead like that hairy arms and fur sort of fur covering, bristly brown gray hair all over their abominably plump bodies is the exact description. So.
Which I think is a good segue to antagonist with me. And the antagonist,
it's ones all around for themes, right?
I believe it is.
The ones all around for themes. I got us down there. So the Canaanites, they're an effective antagonist, but they're really just because it's a first person thing and they're not really developed. It's kind of hard because
are they though? That's what I'm gonna get into. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Because they're not developed in the same way like Grigori is.
Are they effective?
Are they effective? Yeah, they are effective. They're an effective catalyst.
Maybe, but not. See, the thing is, they're not. In fact, they're like the opposite of antagonizing the characters. At least, unless maybe versus Grigori, right? They're not like fight. Like, there's no struggle.
Okay, maybe this is one of those things where we like. Maybe there's like a nebulous thing. It's just like the unknown is the antagonist.
Paranoia.
Paranoia. Course. All right.
Like hidden motivations, perhaps. But like the Catamites themselves, in the story, at least within the actual events of the story, are not antagonizing anything.
That's true. That's absolutely true. But you're right. The antagonism actually probably comes from God, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Is it Grigori?
Yeah.
Grigori.
I thought you were going to say Knight.
Yeah. Grigori is definitely his paranoia is basically what fuels the story.
Yeah, but the thing is, he's properly paranoid in a sense. Like, right?
He's right.
He was
like
right.
You nailed it perfectly before you're like, oh, he comes off as a conspiracy theorist, but he's not. He's right.
So maybe just
but he's still a conspiracy theorist. He's just correct.
His conspiracy happens to be right.
All right.
In this instance, for sure. Like maybe that's somewhat themes too. Like if you're properly paranoid, then you'll be prepared when aliens come to harvest us all for food. Right. I don't know, but like the antagonist angle, like again, I think it must be. If you're going to give it a 1, you have to give it a 1 for an abstract, not for the actual aliens in the story. So that's only my point on that.
No, you're absolutely right. Because for the aliens themselves, I'd probably give them a 0. Because they weren't developed. But if you're looking at the abstract, Grigori and his motivations were what fueled the story. And they were what was the most interesting. So if we were going to agree on an abstract, then I'll give it a 1.
Okay. What do you think, Steve-O?
I am going to give it a 0. I don't think that it is a super compelling antagonist. And, I like this story, but it lacked a sense of
sort of a punch,
proper fear, I guess, of like what's happening, and like to me, it's a story that's very short and it's
That's true.
huge.
There's not much time to
It's hugely
develop.
known because of Twilight Zone, but there was never any time where I felt like it was just a great antagonist in any way, and I'm gonna have to give it a 0 for that. Even the unsubstantial one. I don't think that it needs to. I don't think that this story necessarily needed a super strong antagonist. I think it was told well in the way that it was told, but it could have perhaps been more compelling a little bit if there was a stronger antagonist. And I think I'm going to give it a 0 for that.
See, I'm wavering because, like, it's harsh because I see both ends, and, like, I was almost going to convince myself, but as you were talking, I was thinking more about it. Like, I may be going more on your side. Maybe at the point of taking away here, I'll ship elsewhere. But it's really close. It's either going to be a soft 0 or a soft 1 for me. I know I'm a big proponent of, like, the abstract concept versus, like, the corporeal characters or elements in something like this. But I think in this case, like, I may just err on the side of a 0 just a little bit, like, just the slightest amount. I think I'm coming down, like, just a little bit on your side of the fence.
Well, I've said my piece, but Chris, you got an argument against for that?
No, I'm going to back up. This is part 1. Part 2 is going to come later.
Okay.
Of why the abstract works. For me.
I got
But
you.
you're giving it a 1, Chris?
Yeah, I'm giving it a 1.
All right.
Yeah, I'm thinking
0
with
for
a
you, Scott.
very soft 0, but still 0 at the end of the day, yeah.
Okay.
And Scott, it's to you with protagonist.
Another one I'm somewhat wavering on
Yeah.
because, like, I don't even remember the fucking protagonist's name, to be honest.
He wasn't named.
I think he might have been, like, he was like, Grigori might have said, like, hey, X name, whatever your damn name is, if it was even there. But the thing is, again, in this case, he's just a vehicle for the action, again, for the idea, as we were saying earlier. So he hardly has any characteristics. He works for the UN, and he's interested in languages. That's fine. Other than that, though, like, there's no real nuance. There's no, like, subtlety to him. There's no exploring, like, the ins and outs of his psyche and so forth. He's just there to serve as a springboard, essentially.
Yeah. He's there to serve.
Yes. He's there to...
He's there to serve Grigori.
His function is to be the springboard. So I'll try to avoid, again, in order to avoid being a hypocrite, try to avoid using the overuse of the word serve and all variations thereof. But regardless, I just don't think there's enough there to him as a protagonist, per se. Even though, yeah, it's from his point of view. But really, like, as you just alluded to and said, that Grigori is the more interesting character, the more important character, in fact, really. So, again, sort of a default 0, unless you guys have something to convince me otherwise. That's what I'm looking at.
Well, I think I'm actually going to give him a 1. And here's the reason. I think that he goes through, like, a wide range of, like, emotion throughout this, and you see kind
a
of
wide range. Yeah,
you see kind of Grigori's understanding of, so Grigori is always on the side of, like, against, and he's always on the side of for until the very end. When
he's like nominally. Harlan, before you go on, there's some line in the beginning where he's like, "I found them okay." Like, what was it? I'm trying to find it, but he does mention that, like, I initially thought the Catamites were decent.
Yeah. He was the only one that was, like, for them in the beginning.
I was in the minority. I didn't think they were trying to put anything over.
Yeah, and, like, he goes from that, but for some reason he gets down in, like, the depths of, like, trying to understand what this book is that is stolen and you learn about him because he is just into linguistics and he loves, like, trying to translate
all you learn,
things.
I guess is my point. Go on.
Right, but I think that is an interesting little side effect of what's going on in the story, and, like, you get to see kind of what he's seeing of all this, and he, knowing the end of it, you realize that he's just kind of silly. But for me, I feel like I would be this guy, and, like, I see myself in him where I'm like, all right, well, I'm not gonna judge these fucking weird looking aliens just because they're weird looking aliens. I'm gonna try and, like, see what they have to offer, and then they have something great to offer, and then as he gets down deeper and deeper into the depths of, like, trying to figure out how their language works, all this stuff, like, it takes on a kind of a darker tone. Like, he doesn't necessarily, like, say anything about it, but, like, it feels like you're going down a path that's going to lead to somewhere weird, if not bad,
Is
and
he-
and it turns out it's bad.
Is he? Well, this is probably going to decide for me.
Mhm.
Is he the protagonist or is he just a narrator? But the thing was, I was coming on the side of just being a narrator until Steve-O, nice, maybe convincing, doing 2 for 2 on convincing us because he does kind of his emotions, his perspective changes. He's not just like a cold
Slightly
by the
though,
numbers narrator. He is. It's like Grigori and what they do does kind of influence him. But then again, this thing is told in hindsight, so.
And what I, excuse me, and what I want to actually say is, your reaction at the end of this story to what the end of the story is when Grigori says it's a cookbook, your reaction is the narrator's reaction. Your protagonist's
Well, at least
reaction,
that's what the story is
right?
going
Like
for.
that's the entire idea. Like, so you feel this wide range of emotions, like being proven wrong, and like I think that's fucking good. I think that's really good development for a character, because you at that point are in his shoes when Grigori says it's a cookbook. You're like, oh shit, and that's exactly what he would be feeling at that time. And I got to give it a 1 for that.
Yep, you just convinced me. That nailed it on the head. Nice to use your. Yep.
Probably, but like for me, like I think that's more style though. That's a really good like effect, but it doesn't to me doesn't add anything to the protagonist as a character as such. So like you were saying like when it was mentioned that he's into linguistics and trying to decipher language, that again that is an aspect to him, but there's not. To me, there's nothing there beyond that. There isn't much there. So, again, I don't think you've quite convinced me in this case. Maybe,
That's fine.
like, you made a couple good points, don't get me wrong. But, just for me, again, he's a vehicle for it. So, yeah, you're put in his shoes, which makes you, like, the reader, essentially, the protagonist in a sense. And he's gone. Like, it doesn't matter what, you are him. At least, so that's how I took it. That was sort of my gut reaction. Even given
exactly
that,
like Beckham, because you are him.
Yes, exactly. Even given that interpretation, so I'm going to go with a soft 0. Stick with a soft 0 still
All right.
for the end of the day for Protag though.
Is that a 1 for you, Chris?
Yeah, it's a 1.
All right.
And so Steve-O, it's up to you with supplementary character.
Supplementary characters.
Or
All right.
character.
So I guess
Supporting.
Grigori counts as a supporting character. I liked him. I think he actually is the character that had the most. I don't want to say development, because he didn't have all that much development. He kind of had a standpoint and stayed with it throughout the entire.
He was more fleshed
thing.
out than the protagonist,
but he was well fleshed out, especially for like a 6-page story, and that's pretty much it. I guess the other people at the UN could kind of count,
they're
but
just window dressing.
yeah.
At least that's how I say it.
So I think he's the only supporting character, and I liked him.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna give it a 1, but I don't have much more to say about him. You know, like
Well, the funny thing is, we've been describing him over the course of everything else.
he is kind of what the narrator frames himself around.
Yep.
Which
Exactly,
I gotta
dude.
give him a 1 for that, I guess. So you know, you guys get it.
That's pretty much it. That's well said.
Yep.
Like that's kind of what I'm gonna do, because I got that sensation while reading it. And yeah, like I said, Grigori is like in a sense, the most important character, even though he's technically a side character, sure, a supporting one, but like by far the most important one. He's doing more work than the protagonist is in a sense. Yes, eventually they collaborate, but nevertheless, like he never gives up his conviction. He's always convinced that there's some kind of ulterior motive, and ta-da, he was fucking right. So like and he's the one who reveals like it's a cookbook, the end. So yeah, I think while he might not be the most characterized side character ever in the world, I think because of the nature of the story, and yeah, like you said, the guy said, given the length of it, he deserves a 1, or at least I'm going to give him a 1 from my perspective.
And he's the reason I get in the abstract. It's why I gave him credit for the abstract, because originally, until Steve-O brought up the ending and the fact that the narrator, in a sense, you're kind of the protagonist and the narrator, that it was effective. My whole point was my whole thinking was you needed the abstract because Gregory was the strongest character.
I agree with that.
And because of that, I felt that to counterbalance that, his abstract needed to be the antagonist, and he was a supporting character. So I figured that's what my theory, my feeling for giving him the abstract, because if the story is really he's the strongest character in it, then it's his antagonist. It's his antagonist. It's his point of view.
Sure.
So that's why I gave the antagonist a 1.
All right, I got you. But I'm definitely giving supporting one specifically, definitely for him.
So one's all across the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And comes to me with dialogue, and the only person with dialogue in it, except for the random ambassadors or whatever, is Gregory.
That's not true. Kata might say 2 or 3 words.
Oh, okay, yeah,
That's true.
The Ketamets,
Walked.
walked
in a spaceship.
in a spaceship.
Anyway,
the red one. It's, I don't know. There isn't much dialogue in this, but I have to say, I really like Gregory. I mean, he really. I kind of feel like he really is the nexus to it. So it basically comes down to the last 2 paragraphs of the story and the punchline.
that's the thing, right? Like, everything before that is sure fine. It's there. It's not like amazing dialogue by any means. It just moves the plot along quickly enough in a quick story, but. Because of that, because like you said, the punchline thing, it depends, I guess, how well you think it pays off, especially lead up to it, the quick like conversation lead up to it. So again, this is one I was wavering on. I was gonna give it a 0, just because like it again, nothing wrong with it. It's not bad. It's just there to. The last time I want to say this, it's serviceable. It's like which I often say, anyways, in other stories, and that's how I felt about it throughout this one. Except again, unless you like sort of elevate the last. Page or 2, like not even like the last, like you said, paragraph of exchanges, and then leading up to the it's a cookbook, bam, wham line.
Basically, anytime they have an argument or discussion about it, that's the only thing that's fleshed out. Because looking at it now, I remember the whole thing about the missionary.
Yeah, I mean
about
that's a fine
the Ketamets
conversation,
not having a religion, and the whole point of like to have
actually that's pretty good. Yeah.
The whole point of altruism, true altruism, or what about the missionaries? And he was just like, well, they were to spread the religion. The Ketamets aren't really spreading anything. They're giving things. They're not trying to convert. So that really brought an interesting idea.
I actually forgot about that little exchange. So that might have convinced me, because you're right. Now that I remember that you brought it up, that was pretty good. So that might have actually switched me a little bit over the line. That plus the ending little exchange as well. Might have just pushed it over like a 60-40 kind of split, but I might give it a soft 1 now, having thought about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna just because there's not much of it, and because
that was my original.
Yeah, I mean it serves. It's to serve plot.
That's awesome.
It's the reason for the dialogue in this. It's nothing special. I'm gonna probably go with a 0 on it, and I can see that. I can see why.
I can too, and I'm probably going to be with Scott on a 60-40 because I was going to give it a 0, but I do like I do have to say I really like the ideas he brings in, and the missionaries be damned. Missionaries have a religious motive. If these creatures have a religion, they haven't mentioned it once. They didn't send a missionary group; they sent a diplomatic delegation. And group representing the will and policy of their whole people. I mean, it's not like great dialogue, but what it says, what he's saying, I think is interesting. What he said held my attention.
Fair enough. Yeah, and like I said,
so again, I agree with Scott. Over, yeah, it's probably a 60-40, something like that. But yeah,
I'm going with that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stick with a 0. I think it's just not enough.
Yeah, I can see either way.
It's fine, but it's not.
I was playing you're basically this a 0.
You're basically 60-40 the other way.
Yeah.
It seems more or less.
Okay. Right. And Scott with style.
Yeah, so I think to open with, I'm going with a softer 1. I liked it. It was, I don't want to say it was clipped, but it was very nicely like moving along. Like there's no floweriness to it, but neither was it bland or curt or boring as well. I think he found a nice balance. Again, just to keep it moving along. Very almost not Hemingway sentences, but just simple sentences, simple structure, but built up, kept it along. gave you what you needed, information you needed to know, but also hid from you information that would have ruined it before the final reveal. So yeah, I think it was nicely done, well executed. Not the most amazing style in the world, but definitely solid enough for a 1 for me.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. It wasn't at any time boring. This story kept my attention all the way through, and told a story in an interesting way. A way that we've seen a bunch of times since then. But this came out in 1950, but we've seen it a bunch of times since then because of this story. And
something we said a lot about stories around this era.
And it had like I said, it had the O. Henry ending, but it was a good twist at the end. I've always loved the Twilight Zone episode, and for a good reason.
I mean, it's classic and stands for a reason.
It's just like it's that one. It's one sentence that this story turns on, and for that I give a lot of credit. I'm going to definitely give it a 1.
All right.
I agree with you. I'm going to give it a 1. I like the way this story was done. But there's a previous episode we did where I actually picked out Time Enough at Last.
We've been on like a sort of a Twilight Zone kick.
Well, I mean, my motivation is pretty much going back to the pulp, because I grew up, when I was growing up, there was Analog magazine that I'd read, and those were much more developed stories. So to me, this is a bit of history that I'm trying to fill in my own science fiction blank. Sure. And I like the aesthetic, even if it's like a 5-page story. Mm-hmm. I always like the aesthetic, especially from this era. But I do like the way this was constructed. The little things. So I'm just going to give it a 1. I
feel you. I think we agree.
Yeah.
All right. And Steve-O, would you recommend this?
I do. I think that it's a good story. I think that it's interesting. You'll get the same story if you watch the Twilight Zone episode, but it's a good sci-fi just short read. It'll take you 15 minutes to read it at most, and it's just a fun little story to go through. I actually enjoyed going back, because I hadn't seen the Twilight Zone episode in a number of years at this point. For whatever reason, I missed it on New Year's last few years.
The previous countdowns.
And, I just enjoyed going back through it again. And actually, I read this a few months ago when we did 8 o'clock in the morning, I think.
Yeah.
Because we had both of those lined up together. Was it 8 o'clock in the morning that we had?
No, it was the...
it was the
Time
other.
Enough Last.
It was Time Enough at Last. So we read both these at the same time. We were trying to decide which one to do. We did Time Enough at Last for the first one, and then
there was a bit of
this came up again, and I was like, oh, all right, I'll read it again, and I enjoyed reading it again. So it's an enjoyable read. It's quick and it's a good read. If you know the ending, obviously it's not going to be like a huge surprise, but it's still an enjoyable enough read, even if you know the twist ending.
Exactly. The two things the lead up to it is still perfectly, like I said, solidly built. It's well structured, and yeah, like I said, I think you said it, Chris, that it almost reads like a treatment, like a very early draft or like a rough outline for the episode itself, because everything that's in it is in that. I was, like I said, I had not read it before. So I was sort of curious to see what they changed, if anything, or what was different. Not much really.
Nope.
They threw in a secretary character in the episode because I guess she had to have a woman, but she basically plays Grigori's part
instead of Grigori, right?
Yeah, but she's much more optimistic.
Sure, but either way, I still do recommend it. Yes, like you said, it was nice to sort of fill out the gaps in perhaps our sci-fi history, as we might call it. But yeah, it's damn solid. And it's a quick read, like you said, Steve-O. You can get through it on your lunch break or on a quick break or whatever, and it's still worth it, I think. And I do recommend it.
I agree. I most certainly recommend this. Obviously, I did in fact recommend it. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, this is probably the 4th or 5th time I've read it, because I have been the last couple of years going through and looking these things up. And it's one of those things where, you can read on your coffee break or whatever, and while you're grabbing a bite to eat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
All right.
So I have the scores if you'd like them.
Where does it leave us?
Chris, generous Chris, you have given this a 9.
You talked me into it, man. I was going to give it an 8.
Technically, I guess.
Scott and I have given it 7s, which leaves us with a 7.66, I believe.
Sure.
Is that correct?
Assuming you've done the math correctly.
Yes, I think that's correct.
And that's pretty damn solid. maybe like a slightly lower, but still like pretty close to where I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah. I think it's about where
Round
it
up
should
to
be.
an 8, and
Yeah.
you're good.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, because this is a binary scale, we can't really like put on paper like, well, this is a 60-40
Sure.
split because it's a little grayer than that. But yeah, it's an enjoyable read. It packs a lot for a very short time,
Exactly. Well said.
and it at the cost of certain things. But overall, unless anybody has anything else to say, except to say, I'm gonna one of the strengths of Rod Serling, going back to the thing, one of the strengths of Rod Serling is that he can take something like this or Time Not for Last and really flesh things out.
Sure.
Mm.
Agreed.
So props to him.
Always.
Make a 10-minute read into a half-an-hour episode.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good,
Always
good
props to
stuff.
Sterling.
So
For sure.
unless anybody else has to say, we'll sign off. I've been Chris Morgan. I've been here with Scott Thurlow
And I, for one, welcome our Catamite overlords.
and Stephen Rose.
Have a good night.
See you next
Good
time.
night.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.